That'll give us plenty.
Okay, and then let's mute all. Okay, we're rolling. It's recording.
Mike, you're muted.
Mike, you're on mute.
Okay, there we go. Good start, Mike. So good morning and welcome everybody here to the Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Michael Cox. I'm the worship associate today, and alongside Fran Corton, who will be giving our sermon, and Caroline Davidson, who will be telling our story for today. A couple things before we get going. I wanted to remind everybody of the fundraising committee has developed some cool little bumper stickers for cars. These are that, and you can even see what it looks like on your car. And right here, this is Jane Martin's car, I think. And what they're asking fundraising committee is for $25. You can buy your own bumper sticker to put on your car. And to do that, you can go to Cedars website and donate through the PayPal account, or you can send a check. And then Jane, bless her heart, will be at the Cedars Center from 2 to 4 on Monday the 17th, Monday the 24th, and Monday the 31st to provide you with your bumper stickers. And you can come at that point too and bring money. So buy a cool bumper sticker and put it on your car. The other announcement, mark your calendars. On Sunday, January 30th, we'll be having a board-led service. That's going to be on giving and receiving. And also after that, we'll have our all congregational meeting after that. So mark your calendars for June 30th for that activity. So before we start, I wanted to pause just for a second to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Coast Salish tribes. The homelands of the Squamish, Duwamish, Klallam, and Chimicum people were ceded under duress during the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern day members of these tribes to learn about their living culture and history. As you know, our faith community is sustained by the generosity of our members. Your contribution will nourish the growth of our community through weekly worship and ongoing programs that cultivate connection, belonging, sharing, and caring. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. So if you'd like to give, if you could go to the PayPal account on our website, and you can donate there along with donating for the car magnet stickers. So a general welcome to everybody. For some of you who don't attend Cedars very often, Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of the languages and cultures and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender and the beauty of who and how we love, we welcome you. And with all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you here today. And you're invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. Traditionally, at this point, we would get up and hug our neighbor or say hello. So all I can say is let's have a big group hug right now to everybody through Zoom. And hopefully soon, we will be back in person where we can actually at least acknowledge each other, but maybe still not hug each other. So Fran's going to give our call to worship. Fran, unmute yourself. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I am so glad to be with you this morning, this day before we celebrate the great contributions of Martin Luther King. I want to acknowledge a couple of people on this call. Fran Mercer is over in Seattle, an active member of the UU congregation over there in the University District. And I also want to acknowledge that my daughter and granddaughter are also on this call under the name Diana Partington, and they're waving at you, and they are coming to us from Nashville, Tennessee. So with that, we once thought this would be an in-person service, but that didn't turn out to be the case. And here we are. And I just say, thank goodness for Zoom. It allows us to have people from many different places join us, and that's great. So let me give you a little bit of background on today. I actually volunteered to do this service. And the reason was I wanted to pull together some thinking that I had been doing based on a bunch of reading. And the reading was about how a lot of our most fundamental assumptions about who we are in the world and how we relate to other beings seem to be shifting. Mostly those changes are kind of at the margin of the culture, but some important ones seem to be creeping into the mainstream. So I wasn't really sure what I wanted to say in this sermon, which actually is a little scary once you volunteered, because maybe I didn't really have anything coherent to say. But as you all know, there's nothing like a deadline. And as I worked on the sermon and talked about it with Mike Cox, who was extremely helpful, I began to realize that many of the changes in assumptions that I was seeing relate squarely to the UU's 7th principle: respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So, as you will see, that became the focus of this service. So today we will look at what our 7th principle really means for ourselves, our culture, our planet, and our future. Come, let us worship together.
Thank you, Fran. Again, for some of those who aren't as familiar with our services, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give a little personal reflection, hopefully in tune with what Fran and Caroline are going to be talking about in theirs. And then we'll do a chalice lighting, which for the UUs here is a part of the process that we follow. So I'll give a little reflection on an experience I had that I think is related. First of all, I wanted to ask, how many of you have ever spent 3 or more days in the wilderness with no human contact? Nobody, just 3 days all by yourself. How many of you have done that? Is Rod Kempkus on here? I'll find him. He probably has. But anyway, I did it once, and it really changed the trajectory of my life. And I'll tell you the story. When I was 19, I enrolled in a 28-day outward bound course in the Three Sisters Wilderness area in Central Oregon. Those who don't know about Outward Bound, it's a program that provides outdoor education programs, generally for young people, but also for older folks. My course was backpacking, rock climbing, glacier travel and rescue, and it was really, really hard. And the reason it was really hard is I'd really not done much backpacking, and I was thrown together with 14 other people that I didn't know, and we had to figure out how to get things done. And there were some scary moments. But one element that was very unique was something called a 3-day solo. And what the solo entailed was literally staying in one place for 3 days, all by yourself, no contact with anybody else. The instructions: we could wear as many clothes as we wanted. We could take a tarp for shelter and a pen and paper for writing in a journal, but no food, no sleeping bag. That was it. Now, this was in mid-September, so it was chilly. So every night, what I had to do was to start a fire to keep warm, and then I had to sleep during the day. And up to this point in my life, to be honest, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had not started college. I was uncertain on the direction. And this solo really did change my worldview a bit. And at first, during this solo, I tried to keep myself busy by gathering firewood, going for little short walks that I could around the area and writing my diary. But I started asking myself, what in the world am I going to do for 3 days? This is going to drive me crazy. But over time, I really started to relax and just sit still and started looking around. And at that point, it was really amazing what I started to see and hear. And I was right on by a river, so we could get water. And animals would come up to drink water and look for food. And at first, they would notice me and then scamper away. But over time, they just stopped, looked at me, and then just kind of went about their business. I started hearing birds. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them, which I could never do before. At nighttime, I'd see the eyes of raccoons, and they kept getting closer and closer at night, which was a little spooky, but they were harmless. And then I saw black bears at the river, and at first they'd scamper away, but then they started to get comfortable and they simply ignored me. So I really started to look at things differently. I realized that I was just one part of this bigger ecosystem. And then in fact, I was the visitor here. I was in their place. And I started really to realize the value, the connection I was feeling with the world around me, and realizing how important it was to preserve these spaces and how important it was to take care of the earth. And I thought at the core, we're all animals, of course. But I realized we all needed food to survive and shelter, protect us, and water. And we all wanted to protect our family from harm. So those 3 days alone in the wilderness of Oregon set me on a track of really thinking what was important and where I could find satisfaction. Made me start thinking that maybe, just maybe, I could do something to help in the environment, to preserve the environment for everybody, for plants, for animals, for everybody. So after I completed Outward Bound course, I did enroll in college and started down the path of working in the environmental field for many, many years. So I've tried over the last 45 years or so, I really have tried to practice what Fran has suggested and we'll be talking about today, about recognizing the importance of embracing the interdependent web of life. So I dedicate the lighting of our chalice to the hope that we can all slow down and take time to sit in nature or wherever you are and to start feel the connection we all have with the natural environment out there and all the creatures, small and large. So now I'd like to everybody to join me, for those who know it, in our call to worship, call to the service. So as we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because they are our family. To take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be. So I light the chalice. Thank you. And Carol Ann, you're on.
Okay. So I have a story that I'd like to share with you today. It's called The First Salmon Ceremony Story. And my story is slightly adapted from the writing of Robin Wall Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass. And it is about how indigenous people mark the returning of the salmon each year. Different tribes, my understanding is different tribes celebrate in different ways, but my story is from the book Braiding Sweetgrass. She writes, "Far out beyond the surf they felt it. Beyond the reach of any canoe, half a sea away, something stirred inside them. An ancient clock of bone and blood that said, 'It's time.' Silver-scaled body in its own sort of compass needle spinning in the sea, the floating arrow turned toward home. From all directions they came, a sea, a funnel of fish, narrowing their path as they gathered closer and closer, until their silver bodies lit up the water, red mates sent to sea, prodigal salmon coming home. The people make ready for the arrival of their brothers, the salmon, who bring food in the canoe of their bodies. The women sew shells upon their finest garments for the dance. They mend nets and practice old songs. The people light the way with fire, a beacon to bring their brothers home. They mean for it to say, 'Come, come, flesh of my flesh, my brothers, come back to the river where your lives began. We've made a welcome feast in your honor.' Out at sea there is a pinprick of light on a pitch-black coast, a match in the darkness, flickering, beckoning. The time has come. As one body they turn to the east, turn toward the shore and the river of home. By sunrise the headland is gray with white and white with ash. The people stand along the river singing a welcome, a song of praise as the food swims up the river, fin to fin. The hook-jawed leaders are allowed to pass, to guide the others and to carry the message to their upriver relatives that the people are grateful and full of respect. The fish course by the camp in great throngs, unharmed as they make their way upstream. Only after 4 hours of fish have moved safely by is the first salmon taken by the most honored fisher and prepared with ritual and care." Oops, I just lost my space as I looked up. Here we go. Sorry about that. "It is carried to the feast in great ceremony on a cedar plank and a bed of ferns. And then they feast on the sacred foods, salmon, venison, roots, and berries. They celebrate the water that connects them all in a ritual passing of the cup. They dance in long lines, singing thanks for all that is given. The salmon bones are placed back in the river, their heads facing upstream so that their spirits might follow the others. They are destined to die as we are all destined to die, but first they have bound themselves to life in an ancient agreement to pass it on, to pass it on. In so doing, the world itself is renewed. Only then the nets are set out, the weirs are put in place, and the harvest begins. Everyone has a task. An elder counsels the young one with a spear. Take only what you need and let the rest go by, and the fish will last forever. When the drying racks are full with winter food, they simply stop fishing." So that is my story for today, and what I'd like you to do now is to take out a piece of paper with some pencils or markers or a pen, and think about how you can express gratitude to the web of life that feeds you, the plants, the mammals, the fish, and the birds. Perhaps it's a thank you note, a picture, or a poem, or a blessing. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to draw or create something as an act of gratitude to the web of life that feeds us, and then I'll share mine, and maybe one or two of you could share yours. Okay. That was just about 2 minutes. I know it might take people longer to, oh, am I, yes, I am unmuted. It might take people longer to create something. I'm going to share what I did, which I have to admit, I'm not much of an artist, at least not impromptu for short periods of time. So I made a little PowerPoint thing here that I want to share with you. Here we go. Hopefully this will work. Okay. So on our best nights before dinner, my family says we're grateful for whatever. If we're eating something, a meat, we'll say we're grateful for the fish for giving us its life, or to the farmers. And anyway, we are not vegetarian, but I try to have reverence towards the animals. And this is the PowerPoint that I came up with for myself. And the light in me honors the light in you is my words of gratitude. Many of you know I'm a yoga teacher, and I was going to put namaste, but I thought this just served it better. And these are photos of different animals that we eat. I also include worms because they provide good soil for my garden. And I included bees for pollinating. And I have pictures of our chickens who give us eggs. And these are photos. We do grow most of our own food. Last year I tried an experiment and I grew quinoa. This is quinoa, which I grew in our garden, which was a big pain to harvest. But we did that, some salmon berry, our onions, yin yang beans, which are one of my favorites, and some more pictures of our harvest. I also included a picture of farm workers because there's many foods that we eat that come from farmers that are working in the fields all day in the hot sun. So this is my picture of gratitude. And I'd like you all, or I'd like to invite you to put whatever creations you have, maybe up on your fridge or somewhere near you. I'm going to stop seeing how to stop screen sharing here. See if I can get back. Okay, here we go. I'd like to invite you to do the same. So would anyone, one or two of you, maybe like to share in words of gratitude or something that you created? Just unmute yourself first if you choose to. Nobody's going to be bold enough?
Okay, so I'm always bold enough, but I tend to wait.
Okay.
Rather dominant personality. And I'm a little afraid that my idea actually might have an alternate symbolism. But what came to mind for me was the symbol of infinity. And you guys can't necessarily see what I drew. No, you're not at all. Yeah, no. but what I drew was that symbol of infinity, of the snake, and then it's eating its own tail. And that might seem macabre in some ways, but what I think it's supposed to mean is how it's a perpetual cycle of birth and rebirth and rebirth and rebirth. And that's what interdependence with nature means to me. It's just an acceptance of my short time here, but how that just continues the evolution, not just biologically, but as well spiritually, of humanity and our ecosystem. So that's what
Thank you so much.
Kids are still drawing. They're fervently drawing, so they're not done.
I think all forms of, just a reminder that of this web is important for us to think of daily because we can forget. Anybody else like to share?
I'll share. Hi, Carol Ann. Linda here. So, okay, you probably can't see it. And we, so these are like little salal berries or salmon berries down here, and then the sun. And we just threw out words in reflection of nature and our connection to it, which was beauty, appreciation, awe, wonder, grateful, and love. Because it's truly to be in connection to the earth. I think it's just to dig deeply into the self and to nourish, right? That's it.
Okay, Jake?
Hi, Carol Ann. I think one of the things something that you just said about it's easy to forget. I think it's easy also to assume that we are grateful or aware about the resources that it takes to feed us and the things that the planet provides. But I think for me, it's a matter of renewing a kind of ritualizing the gratitude so that it becomes a bigger part of my just regular life. So what I said is basically what you did in your beautiful PowerPoint. And I wrote down that to pause before each meal and acknowledge the source of our food and thank all of the effort, source, and resources it's taken to provide. And also from your story, to take only what I need and allow the rest to pass by.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Esther, did you have your hand up?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I did. Mine is really very brief. I'm sorry, I didn't draw a picture. I just wrote one word. I don't know whether you can see it. It's water. I just wrote the word water. I don't know how to draw, but I made other points on another piece of paper, which I said, we drink water. We bathe with water. Water feeds the trees and plants that we eat. The birds drink water. We all need water somehow in one way or another. So to me, that's what I could come up with. So thank you. No
Thank you,
picture,
Esther.
nothing, just words.
Thank you so much. I think now I really appreciate that because you're right, that talk about the interconnectedness. We all need water. I think we'll move on maybe back. I don't know. I assume Fran is next, but then during coffee hour, if anyone else wants to share, maybe we could share more there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Carol Ann. Yeah, we can share on coffee hour. As a reminder, after the service, we'll have a coffee hour and a discussion. So now, Fran, would you like to give a reflection? And then we'll go and have a song for the Earth Forever Turning.
So I really appreciate Carol Ann's bringing in the words from Robin Wall Kimmerer, which reflect so deeply this very strong connection between humans and the natural world, and that sense of flow and gratitude and kinship. I think you can see how all of the words we've been talking about relate to the seventh of the UU principles, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So I want to continue this spirit of reflection for a moment and ask you and take a pause for you to reflect on that principle. And as you reflect on it, note the thoughts, the images, and the feelings that come up for you. So I'm going to take a few moments to pause while you're able to just really immerse yourself in that principle. Okay, remember what came up, because we're going to return to this at the end of the service. So Mike, you can take it away with the music.
Okay, so the next song is for the Earth Forever Turning.
For the earth forever turning, for the skies for every seed, for our lives, for all we
Okay, Fran?
So let us begin. So in your moment of reflection, you reflected on the UU's 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. So now we're going to delve into that principle in a more intimate way and bring to bear new scientific understandings, new perspectives, and ancient wisdom that is gaining new currency. So I want to plunge in by asking you a question. Have you read or heard of a book called The Soul of an Octopus? I read this book several years ago, and I was totally captivated by what she told about her relationship with an octopus. So an octopus is a creature so alien, so different from myself. But through this book, I learned actually not so different. Cy Montgomery is the author of this book, and she tells about how her octopus friends could recognize her. They like to feel and taste her with their arms, the suckers on their arms. They use tools. They like to do puzzles, and they're quite good at solving them. They're curious. They have a sense of humor. So given all these oh so human-like characteristics, Montgomery finds it obvious to consider them as conscious beings, and to go so far as to say that her octopus friends have souls. So let's pause on that for a moment. Octopus have souls. You know, in the Western world, going back to Plato and even before, we have believed that we humans are the only ones with souls. We're the only ones with consciousness. We're the only ones that use tools. We're the only ones with language. We're the smart ones, so smart that God gave us dominion over all the creatures of the world. But now, if you think an octopus has a soul, you have opened the door to a very different worldview. So let me talk for a moment about worldviews. What's a worldview? Basically, it's a whole set of assumptions that we carry in our heads that provide a lens through which we see the world. We're generally not even aware that we hold these assumptions, nor that they are just assumptions that can change. It's like the fish swimming in water without being aware that it is in water. So one thing that's so interesting about the time we live in is that a lot of our fundamental assumptions are beginning to shift. In the Western world, for centuries, we've assumed that we humans are very distinct from all other creatures. Animals are lower forms, and we're at the top. But that assumption about how distinctive we are has been seriously eroding over the last several decades. It was 60 years ago that Jane Goodall documented how chimpanzees use tools. But she did not publish that finding at the time for fear of being viewed as unscientific. Now we accept the fact that lots of animals use tools. So this makes me ask myself, why is our Western thinking about our relationships with other beings shifting? I think it's due to several forces. One is the one that Carol Ann brought out so well. We have a growing respect for indigenous wisdom. We Westerners must remember that not so long ago, our culture dismissed indigenous people as savages, as beneath us Europeans. Now we are recognizing that actually those indigenous cultures carry profound wisdom, just as Carol Ann brought us in the words of Robin Wall Kimmerer. Many indigenous cultures see animals as kin. Mitakuwe Oyasin, we are all kin. So another force moving this shift in understanding is the threat of climate change. That threat is waking us up to the fact that there is something wrong about how we are relating to the earth. We're on a road to cause our own demise. That immense threat creates a new readiness to challenge long-held assumptions. And a third force is that science, especially biology and ecology, are bringing us fresh perspectives about our assumptions about other living beings, their relationships to each other and to us. So let's dig a little deeper into what the science is telling us. Many of you may know the work of Suzanne Simard. She's the Canadian tree scientist who helped us understand how the mycorrhiza, all those little filaments deep in the soil, help trees survive and thrive. Back in the early 1990s, when Simard was a young forester working for a logging company, she tried to figure out why the trees that the company planted did not do well. The company had cut down all the trees, cleaned the field, sprayed it with herbicide to get rid of all the competition for these new seedlings. So the seedlings had the soil, the sun, and the water all to themselves. So the assumption was that competition is the dominant force in nature, and those who outcompete win. So if the forester eliminates the competition, his favored plants will win. But the seedlings withered. What Simard figured out, and what we all now know, is that eliminating all the competition is not what makes plants thrive. When the trees don't have the organisms in the soil that help them, they wither. And now many authors write about that cooperation, not competition, is actually the more dominant force in nature. So Simard has continued her work, and that hers, together with others, such as Peter Wolleben, have expanded to tell us how trees communicate with each other. Some of you may know some of Wolleben's work, such as The Hidden Life of Trees. So it turns out trees can hear, taste, smell. They warn each other about impending threats. So we have to stretch our minds beyond octopuses to trees, understanding that some of our most valued human capacities we share with trees. So if octopuses have consciousness, trees can feel and communicate. How about worms and gnats? How about the very cells of our body? Is there a consciousness there too? For the authors I am reading, the answer is yes. All of those have consciousness and purpose and choice-making capacity. Yes, cells. The cells in our body are constantly making purposive choices. So who is saying this and what do they mean? Well, among my favorites is Jeremy Lent, who goes into this in his most recent book, The Web of Meaning. This is a big book. He writes a lot, but it is so meaningful. I read every single word. His previous book was The Patterning Instinct. So he most eloquently brings up all the many elements of a shifting worldview that is much more in contact with our reality. You know, a local author is Linda Lynn Haupt. This is her book, Rooted: Life at the Crossroads of Science, Nature, and Spirit. And of course, there's Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass. So these are some of the people that are writing from this perspective. My husband, David Corton, writes from this perspective about the needed shift to an ecological civilization. And Krista Tippett, who you may know from her podcast on being, recently interviewed Jane Goodall. And in that interview, Krista noted that out of Goodall's work, we are seeing that there is a social and emotional continuity between us and other creatures. We are a creature among creatures. So listen closely, and you will find these new assumptions about the nature of living beings and their capacities breaking through all around you. So what I find important about these various findings is that they begin to add up to a paradigm shift. So paradigm shift start subtly, building up piece by piece. And then suddenly they reach a point where a new worldview becomes the accepted wisdom. And what I see is that this new way of seeing the world and our interrelationships with all these beings, that shift is gradually, slowly taking hold. And what I find exciting about this shift is that it has the power to connect our minds with our hearts. These other creatures are something like us. They're conscious, purposive, feeling, thinking beings, such that for some, we can even say they have their own form of a soul. The implications of that understanding are enormous, and they range from the mundane to the global. So for example, even though I've never been fond of eating octopus, after reading The Soul of an Octopus, there is no way I could eat an octopus. Now, I admit I eat bacon, and I know pigs are very smart and very lovable, so a little hypocrisy there. But another shift is I see trees more in their wholeness, and it makes it even more painful to see a clear cut and understand how much is lost. Not just the trees, but all the vibrant life in that soil. We begin to see this whole earth as a living being and feel in our gut the utter tragedy of how we are destroying it. So that connection of mind with heart is coming at a critical time. So science tells us we're on a deadly trajectory that will require us to make huge changes in how we live if we are to survive. But to make big changes, we need more than facts, more than analysis. We need to feel the imperatives in the very essence of our being. So now I want you to come back to the seventh principle, and we're going to pause again. So that principle is respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. So again, we're going to take a little pause, and I want you to reflect on the principle again after hearing these words I've been providing. And again, note what thoughts, feelings, and images come up this time. So we'll pause for just a few moments. So were your reflections this time any different than your previous ones? I hope you'll share some of these reflections in our coffee hour that follows right after this service. For me, the wording of our seventh principle actually doesn't ring quite right. We say respect for the interdependent web of life. Now, respect is a very cerebral word, and it kind of objectifies this interdependent web. It places it outside of ourselves. Maybe that's why we have to add the phrase of which we are a part. But the worldview I see emerging in our culture, and that I think is so important, is a knowing in the depths of our souls that we are an integral part of this web of life. So let me run by you my own personal revision of the seventh principle. A little audacious, but here it goes. As you use, along with many other people around the world, we embrace in the depths of our souls the reality that we are each an integral part of the vast interdependent web of existence. Well, I admit that doesn't quite fit the style of the principles, but it says that we really, really believe this. So indeed, we are a part of a living, breathing earth. As a human, we are a creature among creatures, a soul among souls. So I thank you for giving me an excuse to pull together these thoughts and share them with you. And now we'll hear the UU congregation in Northern Nevada sing our hymn, "We Celebrate the Web of Life. Its magnitude we sing, for we can see divinity in every living thing."
We celebrate
So we're coming to the end of our service. So again, for those who aren't familiar, we have a, just follow after me. We'll extinguish our chalice. So we extinguish this flame,
Extinguish this flame,
but not the light of truth,
not the light of truth.
Not the light of truth,
the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
So in closing, let me return to Cy Montgomery, the author of The Soul of an Octopus. In her more recent book, How to Be a Good Creature, she says, being friends with an octopus, whatever that friendship meant to her, has shown me that our world and the worlds around and within it is a flame with shades of brilliance we cannot fathom, and is far more vibrant, far more holy than we could ever imagine. So go forth in joy, knowing you are a creature among creatures, a soul among souls, connected to the vibrant, interdependent web of life on this living earth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Carol Ann. Thank you, Herb. And thank you, everybody, for attending. But don't turn that dial. Keep it on this station. We're going to give about 30 seconds, and then we are going to go into our coffee hour and discussion. We'll start out with the joys and sorrows. For those who are not familiar, that we go around. If people have joys or sorrows they want to share, we do that. And then we'll go into a discussion. And just to remind people, to make it so it's not chaos, if you go down to the reaction button on your bottom, if you click on that, there's this thing that says raise your hand. So in order to kind of keep it okay with almost 40 people kind of flowing, when we get into the joys and sorrows and discussion, if you could go down there, raise your hand, and then we'll call on you to speak.
We're just being a part.
We're not muted.